The morning Julian Cross stumbled into the lobby of Cross Industries, his left hand trembling as he gripped his coffee cup. Elise Martinez knew something was terribly wrong. She had been working at the small cafe in the building's marble lobby for 8 months now, and she noticed things others missed. The way Mr. Cross's speech had become slightly slurred over the past week. How he would pause mid-sentence during phone calls looking confused. The way he pressed his palm against his temple when he thought no one was watching. Everyone else saw the powerful billionaire CEO who built an empire from nothing. They saw the man who worked 18-hour days, skipped meals, and pushed through exhaustion like it was just another business obstacle to overcome. But Elise saw the human being whose body was sending desperate warning signals that everyone including himself was ignoring. She watched from behind the counter as Julian made his way to the elevator, his usually confident stride slightly unsteady. His personal assistant, Rebecca, rushed after him with a stack of papers, chattering about morning meetings and quarterly reports. Julian nodded, but Elise could see the blank look in his eyes, the way he swayed almost imperceptibly. "Another espresso, please," called out one of the executives, snapping Elise back to her duties. She served the drink with a polite smile, but her mind remained fixed on Julian Cross. 3 years ago, she had watched her father display these exact same symptoms. The family had dismissed them as stress, overwork, getting older. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The morning rush continued around her, a blur of expensive suits and important conversations. But Elise's attention kept drifting to the elevator bank, wondering if Julian had made it to his office safely. She had no business worrying about a man she had never spoken to, a billionaire who probably didn't even know her name. But something deep in her heart wouldn't let her ignore what she was seeing. At lunchtime, she witnessed the moment that made her decision. Julian was in the lobby again, this time leaving for what she assumed was a business lunch. He stood waiting for his driver, talking on his phone, when suddenly his words became jumbled. He stopped mid-sentence, looking confused and disoriented. For a full 10 seconds he just stood there, phone pressed to his ear, unable to speak. Rebecca appeared at his side, gently taking the phone and explaining to whoever was on the other end that Mr. Cross would call them back. She guided him to a chair, her face filled with concern, but Julian quickly recovered, brushing off her worries and insisting he was fine. But Elise knew he wasn't fine. Every instinct in her body screamed that this man was in serious danger. She thought about her father again, about the stroke that took him just 3 weeks after they first noticed the symptoms. She thought about how different things might have been if someone had spoken up sooner, if someone had been brave enough to insist on medical attention. The afternoon crawled by as she made coffee after coffee, her hands working on autopilot while her mind raced. What could she do? Who was she to approach one of the most powerful men in the city? She was just Elise Martinez, a woman who made barely enough to pay rent, who worked at a cafe because she needed the health insurance for her mother's medical bills. But as closing time approached, she realized she couldn't stay silent. Her father's face haunted her thoughts, along with the regret that had eaten at her family ever since. She couldn't watch another person suffer the same fate when she had the knowledge to possibly prevent it. Taking a deep breath, Elise pulled out a piece of paper from beneath the register. Her hands shook slightly as she began to write, choosing each word carefully. She knew she might lose her job for this. She knew Julian Cross might think she was overstepping boundaries or trying to get his attention for personal gain. But she also knew that staying silent could cost him his life. The next morning, Elise arrived at work an hour early, the note burning in her pocket like a secret she couldn't keep. She had barely slept, going over the words again and again, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. But every time she considered throwing the note away, she saw her father's face, heard her mother crying at his bedside. Julian appeared in the lobby at exactly 7:30 a.m., just like every morning. This time, his symptoms seemed even more pronounced. His walk was unsteady, and when he stopped to check his phone, she saw his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. That was the moment she knew she couldn't wait any longer. "Excuse me, Mr. Cross," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned, and for the first time in 8 months their eyes met. His were tired, strained, with a slight glazed quality that confirmed her worst fears. Up close, she could see the slight droop on one side of his face that hadn't been there a week ago. "Yes," he said, his voice carrying that slight slur she had noticed from across the room. "I'm Elise from the cafe," she said, walking around the counter with legs that felt like jelly. "I have something I need to give you. It's important." Julian looked puzzled but not annoyed. Perhaps it was the serious tone in her voice, or maybe the genuine concern written across her face, but he waited as she approached with the folded piece of paper. Please read this, she said, her voice stronger now. I know I have no right to say anything, but I couldn't stay quiet any longer. She pressed the note into his hand and stepped back, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Julian looked down at the paper, then back at her, clearly confused by the encounter. What is this about? He asked. Just please read it, Elise repeated. And please don't ignore what it says. Julian unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the words she had written and rewritten a dozen times the night before. Mr. Cross, I hope you won't think I'm overstepping, but I need to tell you something important. Over the past 2 weeks, I've noticed symptoms that I recognize: trembling hands, slurred speech, moments of confusion and unsteady balance. These are early warning signs of a stroke. My father had the exact same symptoms 3 years ago. We ignored them, thinking it was just stress and overwork. He had a massive stroke 3 weeks later and didn't survive. I'm not a doctor, just a daughter who lost her dad to something that might have been prevented. Please get checked by a medical professional today. Time matters with these things. I care about what happens to you even though we don't know each other. Please don't let pride or a busy schedule cost you your life. Elise Martinez. When Julian finished reading, the lobby seemed to fall silent around them. He looked up at Elise, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, he folded the note and put it in his jacket pocket. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. Will you please go get checked? Elise asked, her eyes pleading. Julian studied her face, seeing something there that moved him in a way he couldn't explain. Here was a woman who barely knew him, risking her job to warn him about something she had noticed when everyone else in his life had remained silent. Yes, he said finally. I'll go right now. The relief that washed over Elise's face was so profound that Julian felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time anyone had cared about his well-being with such pure, unselfish concern? Thank you, Elise whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Thank you for listening. As Julian turned toward the exit instead of the elevator, calling his driver to take him to the hospital rather than the office, Elise felt a mixture of relief and terror. She had done what she had to do, but now all she could do was wait and pray that she had been right, and that she hadn't been too late. Julian Cross sat in the sterile emergency room, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the fluorescent lighting and plastic chairs around him. The note from Elise was still in his jacket pocket, and he kept touching it like a talisman. 3 hours ago, he would have dismissed her concerns as presumptuous. Now, watching the controlled chaos of medical professionals around him, he realized she might have saved his life. The ER doctor, Dr. Patricia Williams, had taken one look at Julian's symptoms and immediately ordered a battery of tests. Blood work, MRI, CT scan, EKG, the works. As Julian lay in the MRI machine, the loud banging sounds echoing around him, he thought about the young woman who had approached him in the lobby. Her hands had been shaking when she gave him the note, her voice trembling with nervous energy, but her eyes had held a determination that pierced through his usual defenses. Mr. Cross, Dr. Williams said as she entered his room with a tablet in hand. I have your results, and I need you to listen very carefully. Julian straightened in the hospital bed, suddenly feeling vulnerable in his paper gown. Go ahead, doctor. You're showing signs of several mini-strokes, what we call transient ischemic attacks. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, 180/110. You have significant arterial narrowing, and based on your symptoms and test results, I believe you were anywhere from 6 to 12 hours away from a major stroke. The words hit Julian like a physical blow. He prided himself on his control, his ability to power through any obstacle, but this was something no amount of willpower could overcome. The woman who told you to come in, she may very well have saved your life, Dr. Williams continued. Most people ignore these warning signs until it's too late. If you had gone home tonight and gone to sleep, there's a very real chance you wouldn't have woken up. Julian's hands were shaking now, but not from the stroke symptoms. It was pure adrenaline, the shock of realizing how close he had come to losing everything. His empire, his life, his chance to make amends for all the relationships he had sacrificed for success. What happens now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We're admitting you for observation and starting you on blood thinners immediately. You'll need medication for your blood pressure, and we'll schedule you for a procedure to clear the arterial blockage. But Mr. Cross, you need to understand this is a wake-up call. Your lifestyle, your stress levels, your complete disregard for your health, all of that has to change. Julian nodded, but his mind was already racing to Elise. A woman he had never truly noticed, who worked in the lobby of his own building, had cared enough about a stranger to risk her job and her reputation to warn him. While his highly paid executives, his personal assistant, his board of directors had all watched him deteriorate and said nothing. "Doctor, I need to make a phone call," Julian said. "There's someone I need to thank." That evening, as Julian lay in his hospital bed with 4 tubes running into his arm, he called his head of security to get Elise Martinez's contact information. It took some doing apparently. She was listed simply as cafe staff in the building directory, but eventually they tracked down her phone number. Julian dialed with hands that were steadier now, thanks to the medication, but his heart was racing with nervous anticipation. "What do you say to someone who literally saved your life?" "Hello?" Elise's voice was cautious, probably wondering why an unknown number was calling her at 8 p.m. "Elise, this is Julian Cross. From this morning." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Mr. Cross. How are you?" "I'm in the hospital," Julian said, and he heard her sharp gasp. "Elise, you were right. About everything. The doctors said I was hours away from a major stroke. You saved my life." The silence on the other end stretched so long that Julian wondered if the call had dropped. Then he heard quiet sobbing. "I'm so sorry," Elise said through her tears. "I was so scared I was wrong, that I had overstepped, that you would think I was crazy." "You were brave," Julian said firmly. "You saw something everyone else missed and you had the courage to speak up. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't need to thank me," Elise said, her voice still shaky. "I just couldn't watch the same thing happen again. I'm so glad you listened. I'm so glad you're okay." Julian felt something unfamiliar in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with being genuinely cared for by another human being. "Elise, when I get out of here, I want to take you to dinner. I want to properly thank you." "Oh, Mr. Cross, that's not necessary." "Please," Julian interrupted. "Let me do this. You gave me my life back. The least I can do is buy you a meal." There was another pause, then Elise's soft voice. "Okay. If it's important to you, then yes." "It is important to me," Julian said, surprising himself with the emotion in his voice. "More important than you know." After they hung up, Julian stared at the ceiling of his hospital room, his mind reeling with the events of the day. In the space of 12 hours, his entire perspective had shifted. The empire he had built, the success he had achieved, none of it would have mattered if he had died alone in his penthouse, another victim of his own ambition. But a woman who made coffee for a living had cared enough about a stranger to save his life. She had asked for nothing in return, expected nothing, and had been genuinely relieved to know he was safe. When was the last time anyone in his life had shown him such pure, selfless concern? His phone buzzed with messages from Rebecca, his assistant, updating him on rescheduled meetings and board reactions to his sudden absence. The business world was already adapting to function without him, proving what he had always feared but never admitted: he wasn't as indispensable as he thought. But somewhere in the city, a woman named Elise Martinez was probably lying awake worrying about a man she barely knew, grateful that her courage had made a difference. That kind of human connection was something no amount of money could buy, and Julian was beginning to realize it was something he had been missing his entire adult life. The next morning, Dr. Williams discharged Julian with a strict medication regimen and orders to follow up with a cardiologist within the week. His blood pressure was stable, the immediate danger had passed, but his life would never be the same. As his driver pulled up to Cross Industries, Julian felt a familiar urge to rush inside and dive back into work. But as they approached the building, he saw Elise through the lobby windows, preparing the cafe for the morning rush. Something made him tell the driver to wait. Instead of going straight to his office, Julian walked into the lobby and approached the cafe counter. Elise looked up and their eyes met, and Julian saw the same genuine concern from yesterday, mixed now with relief and something that looked like joy. "Mr. Cross," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Better," he said honestly. "Thanks to you." They stood there for a moment, the billionaire CEO and the cafe worker, connected by something far more valuable than money or status: the simple human act of caring for another person. "I meant what I said about dinner," Julian said. "Tonight if you're free." Elise smiled, a radiant expression that Julian realized he wanted to see every day for the rest of his life. "I would love that," she said. As Julian finally made his way to the elevator, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: anticipation for something that had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with the woman who had given him a second chance at living. That evening, Julian stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. He couldn't remember the last time he had been nervous about dinner with anyone. Board meetings with hostile investors, presentations to demanding shareholders, high-stakes negotiations, none of those had ever made his hands shake the way they were shaking now. He had chosen one of the city's finest restaurants, Le Jardin, but now he wondered if that was too much. Would Elise feel uncomfortable in such an elegant setting? The last thing he wanted was to make her feel out of place when she had done something so extraordinary for him. His phone buzzed with a text from his driver. "Outside the address you provided, sir." Julian took a deep breath and headed downstairs. During the short drive to Elise's apartment building, he tried to organize his thoughts. How do you properly thank someone for saving your life? What do you say to a person who cared about you when they had absolutely no reason to? Elise's building was modest but well-maintained, located in a neighborhood that was clearly working class but safe. When she emerged from the entrance, Julian's breath caught in his throat. She was wearing a simple black dress that was elegant without being flashy, her dark hair pulled back in a style that highlighted her beautiful features. But what struck him most was her smile, warm, genuine, and slightly nervous. "You look beautiful," Julian said as he got out to open her door, and he meant it completely. "Thank you," Elise replied, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "You didn't have to come all the way up here to get me." "Of course I did," Julian said, genuinely surprised by her comment. "You're my guest." As they settled into the back seat, Julian noticed Elise looking around the luxury vehicle with wonder but not envy. She seemed to appreciate the comfort without being overwhelmed by it. "Mr. Cross," she began hesitantly. "Please call me Julian," he said. "After what you did for me, I think we can skip the formalities." "Julian," she said, testing the name. "I have to ask, are you really feeling okay? No more symptoms?" The concern in her voice touched him deeply. Even now, she was more worried about his health than impressed by the expensive car or fancy restaurant. "I'm much better," Julian assured her. "The medication is working, and I have a follow-up appointment with a specialist tomorrow. But Elise, I need you to know if you hadn't spoken up when you did, I wouldn't be here right now." Elise's eyes filled with tears. "I keep thinking about my father. About how different things might have been if someone had made him listen earlier." "Tell me about him," Julian said gently. As they drove through the city, Elise shared the story of her father Roberto Martinez, a hard-working man who had immigrated from Mexico and spent 30 years as a construction supervisor. He had always been strong, always pushed through pain and exhaustion, always provided for his family no matter what. "The symptoms started on a Tuesday," Elise said quietly. Mom noticed his hand shaking while he was trying to sign some papers. He brushed it off, said he was just tired. Then he started slurring his words, but he insisted it was just allergies. We believed him because we wanted to believe him. Julian listened intently, understanding now why Elise had been so determined to speak up. "By the time we convinced him to see a doctor, it was too late," she continued. "The stroke hit him that Friday night while he was watching TV with Mom. He never regained consciousness." "I'm so sorry," Julian said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "But your father's loss wasn't in vain, Elise. Because of what happened to him, you knew what to look for. You saved a life, you saved my life." They had arrived at Le Jardin, and Julian watched as Elise took in the elegant exterior of the restaurant. Instead of seeming intimidated, she looked grateful and excited. "This is beautiful," she said as Julian helped her out of the car. "Thank you for bringing me here." The maitre d' greeted Julian by name and led them to a private table by the window with a view of the city lights. As they settled in, Julian found himself studying Elise's face, fascinated by her reactions to everything around them. "Order whatever you'd like," Julian said as she looked at the menu. "This is my way of saying thank you, so please don't hold back." "Julian, you really don't need to do all this," Elise said, though her grateful smile suggested she appreciated the gesture. "Yes, I do," Julian replied firmly. "You gave me the greatest gift possible, more time to live. How do you put a price on that?" As they talked over dinner, Julian learned more about Elise's life. She was 28 years old, had a degree in social work that she couldn't use because the jobs didn't pay enough to cover her mother's medical expenses. She worked at the cafe during the day and did freelance bookkeeping at night to make ends meet. She had never been married, had no children, and spent most of her free time caring for her mother, who suffered from diabetes and arthritis. "What about your dreams?" Julian asked. "What would you do if money wasn't an issue?" Elise's eyes lit up. "I'd love to open a community center in my neighborhood. Somewhere people could get basic healthcare information, job training, help with things like understanding medical bills or insurance forms. So many people in my community work multiple jobs just to survive, and they don't have access to resources that could really help them." Julian was struck by her answer. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter about her circumstances, yet all she wanted was to help others in similar situations. "That's a beautiful dream," he said. "And it sounds like something that could really make a difference." "What about you?" Elise asked. "What's your dream now? I mean, you've already built this incredible company. What's next?" Julian paused, realizing he had never really thought about it that way. His goals had always been about growth, expansion, profit margins. But sitting across from Elise, those things felt strangely hollow. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Yesterday I would have said expanding into Asian markets or acquiring our biggest competitor. But today, I think my priorities are changing." The stroke scare. "That's part of it," Julian said. "But mostly it's meeting you. Seeing how much you care about other people, how you put yourself at risk to help a stranger, it makes me realize I've been living a very small life despite all the success." After dinner, as they walked slowly back to the car, Julian found himself reluctant to end the evening. He had never enjoyed someone's company more, never felt so comfortable just talking and listening. "Elise," he said as they paused outside the restaurant, "I want to do something for you. To properly thank you." "You just did," she protested. "This dinner was more than enough." "No, it's not," Julian said, his voice filled with conviction. "You saved my life. That deserves more than a dinner, no matter how nice the restaurant." "Julian, I don't need anything. What if I told you I wanted to help you make your dream come true?" Julian interrupted gently. "What if I offered to fund your community center?" Elise stared at him in shock. I couldn't accept something that big. That's too much." "It's not too much," Julian said earnestly. "It's exactly right. You gave me back my life and I want to use that life to help make yours better. Please let me do this, Elise. It would mean everything to me." Looking into his eyes, Elise saw not pity or obligation, but genuine desire to help. She saw a man who had been given a second chance and wanted to use it meaningfully. If you really mean it," she said slowly, "then yes. Yes, I accept. With more gratitude than I can ever express." Julian felt a joy unlike anything he had ever experienced in business. This was what success really felt like, not closing a deal or beating a competitor, but making someone else's dreams possible. "There's one condition," Julian said with a smile. "I want to be involved. I want to help you plan it, build it, make it everything you've envisioned." "You'd really want to do that?" Elise asked, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I can't think of anything I'd rather do," Julian said honestly. As they drove back to her apartment, both of them knew that this dinner had been about much more than gratitude. It had been the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both of them desperately needed: a connection built on caring, respect, and the shared desire to make the world a little bit better. The next morning, Julian arrived at Cross Industries with a perspective that would have been unimaginable just days before. Instead of heading straight to his office, he made his way to the lobby cafe, where Elise was preparing for the morning rush. "Good morning," he said, approaching the counter with a smile that felt more natural than any expression he had worn in years. "Good morning, Julian," Elise replied, returning his smile. "How are you feeling today?" "Better than I have in months," he said honestly. "And I meant everything I said last night. About the community center, about wanting to help make it happen." Elise's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "I still can't believe this is real. When I went to bed last night, I kept thinking I had dreamed the whole thing." "It's very real," Julian assured her. "In fact, I've already called my attorney this morning. We're going to set up a foundation specifically for this project." Before Elise could respond, Julian's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Emergency board meeting in 10 minutes. The Henderson merger is falling apart." The old Julian would have rushed upstairs immediately, would have made the Henderson merger his top priority for the day. But looking at Elise, seeing the hope and excitement in her eyes, Julian made a choice that surprised even him. "Rebecca," he said, calling his assistant, "please reschedule the board meeting for this afternoon. Something more important has come up." He could hear the shock in Rebecca's voice. Julian Cross had never, in all the years she had worked for him, postponed a meeting for personal reasons. "Elise," Julian said, turning back to her, "what time does your shift end?" "At 2 o'clock, she replied, looking puzzled. "Perfect. I want to show you something." That afternoon, Julian's driver picked up Elise and took her to an address across town. When they pulled up in front of a large, vacant building with "For Sale" signs plastered across the windows, Elise looked confused. "This is it," Julian said as he helped her out of the car. "Your community center." Elise stared at the building in amazement. It was perfect, large enough to accommodate multiple programs, located right in the heart of her neighborhood, with plenty of parking and public transportation access. Julian, this building must cost a fortune, she said breathlessly. Not a fortune, Julian replied with a grin. Just a small portion of what my life is worth to me. As they walked through the empty space, Julian could see Elisa's mind working, envisioning how each room could be used. Her excitement was infectious, and Julian found himself more energized by this project than he had been by any business deal in recent memory. We could have a health screening area here, Elise said, gesturing to a large room near the entrance. And over there, computer classes for people who need job skills. This space could be perfect for support groups, and that room could be a children's area for parents who need to bring their kids. What about staff? Julian asked. You'll need qualified people to run programs. I know so many people in social work who would love jobs like this, Elise said eagerly. People with master's degrees who are working at coffee shops because social service agencies don't pay living wages. Julian pulled out his phone and called his attorney. Paul, I need you to make an offer on the building I'm looking at. Full asking price, cash offer, close as soon as possible. He paused, listening. Yes, I'm sure. And I need you to start the paperwork for that foundation we discussed this morning. When he hung up, Elise was staring at him with an expression of pure wonder. Julian, I can't believe you're doing all this. Are you sure? This is a huge commitment. Elise, Julian said, taking her hands in his. 3 days ago I was literally dying from the stress of building an empire I didn't even enjoy anymore. You gave me my life back. Now I want to use that life for something meaningful. But what about your company? Your other responsibilities? Julian looked around the empty building, then back at Elisa's concerned face. My company has been running itself for years. I built good systems and hired smart people. But this helping you create something that will genuinely improve people's lives, this feels like the most important thing I've ever done. Over the next several hours they walked through the building multiple times, with Elise pointing out possibilities and Julian taking notes on his phone. He called contractors, architects, and interior designers, setting up meetings for the following week. By the time they left, Julian had spent more money in one afternoon than most people would see in a lifetime, and he had never felt better about any expenditure. There's something else, Julian said as they got back in the car. The foundation I'm setting up, I want you to be the executive director. Julian, I don't have experience running something like this. You have something better than experience, Julian interrupted. You have passion and genuine care for the people you want to help. Everything else can be learned. What kind of salary are we talking about? Elise asked hesitantly. Julian named a figure that made Elise's eyes widen in shock. It was more than triple what she was making at the cafe and her freelance work combined. That's too much, she protested. It's exactly right for an executive director position, Julian said firmly. Elise, you need to start accepting that you deserve good things. You've spent your whole adult life scraping by, putting everyone else's needs before your own. Let me help change that. As they drove back toward her neighborhood, Julian made another decision. There's one more thing I want to show you. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a beautiful apartment complex in a safe, tree-lined neighborhood. It was the kind of place Elise had dreamed of living but never imagined she could afford. Julian, what are we doing here? I want to rent you an apartment here, he said simply. The neighborhood is safe, it's closer to where the community center will be, and you'll have space to actually live instead of just surviving. I can't accept something like this, Elise said, though Julian could see the longing in her eyes as she looked at the building. With your new salary you'll be able to afford it, Julian said. But I want to pay the first year's rent as a gift. Please, Elise. It would make me so happy to know you're living somewhere beautiful and safe. Elise was quiet for a long moment, then she looked at Julian with tears in her eyes. You're changing my entire life in the span of a few days. I don't know how to process all of this. You don't have to process it, Julian said gently. You just have to accept it. You saved my life, Elise. Now let me help make yours everything it should be. Okay, she whispered. Yes, I accept. All of it. With more gratitude than I can ever express. Julian felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the joy of making someone he cared about happy. As they toured the apartment, a spacious two-bedroom with a view of a small park, he found himself imagining Elise living there, safe and comfortable, finally able to breathe instead of constantly struggling. That evening, Julian called his mother, something he rarely did unless it was a holiday. Julian? Is everything all right? Maria Cross asked, her voice concerned. Actually, Mom, everything is better than it's been in years, Julian said. I wanted to tell you about someone very special I met." As he told his mother about Elise, about the stroke scare, about the community center project, Maria was quiet on the other end of the line. "This woman saw something in you that made her risk her job to save a stranger's life," Maria said finally. "And now you're restructuring your entire existence around helping her dreams come true." "I suppose I am," Julian said, realizing it for the first time. "Good," his mother said firmly. "It's about time you found something worth living for besides profit margins. When do I get to meet her?" Julian smiled. "Soon, Mom. Very soon." 3 weeks later, the community center was already taking shape. Julian had thrown himself into the project with the same intensity he had once reserved for corporate acquisitions, but with an enthusiasm that felt entirely different. Instead of the cold satisfaction of outmaneuvering competitors, he felt genuine joy watching Elise's vision come to life. Elise had moved into her new apartment and started her position as executive director of the Martinez Community Center, named after her father, at Julian's insistence. Every morning, she would arrive at the construction site with coffee for the workers and updates on programming plans. Julian found excuses to visit daily, ostensibly to check on progress but really just to see her smile. "The health screening equipment arrives tomorrow," Elise said as they walked through what would soon be the medical wing. "Dr. Peterson from the free clinic is so excited about having a proper space to work in." "What about the computer lab?" Julian asked, though he had received updates from the contractors that morning. "The desks are being installed next week, and the computers arrive right after that." "Julian, I still can't believe this is happening." They had reached what would be Elise's office, a bright room with large windows overlooking the children's playground that was being installed outside. Julian watched as she stood at the window, her face glowing with happiness and purpose. "There's something I need to tell you," Julian said suddenly, his heart racing with nervous energy. Elise turned to face him, her expression curious and open. "These past few weeks, working with you on this project, getting to know you better, it's been the best time of my adult life," Julian said, his usual business confidence replaced by vulnerable honesty. "For me too," Elise said softly. "I never imagined I could be this happy, this hopeful about the future." Julian stepped closer to her, his heart pounding. "Elise, I need you to know that what I'm feeling isn't just gratitude anymore. You didn't just save my life, you gave it meaning. I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment Julian feared he had overstepped, that he had misread the growing connection between them. But then Elise smiled, that radiant expression that had become the highlight of every day for Julian. "I was wondering when you were going to say that," she said, reaching up to touch his face gently. "Because I've been falling in love with you too." Julian felt a relief and joy so profound that it took his breath away. He pulled Elise into his arms, and when he kissed her, it felt like the first truly honest moment of his entire adult life. "I want to take care of you," Julian whispered against her lips. "I want to give you everything you've ever dreamed of and things you haven't even thought to dream yet." "You already have," Elise whispered back. "But Julian, I need you to know I didn't fall in love with your money or your success. I fell in love with the man who gets excited about helping people, who remembers the names of every construction worker, who calls his mother more often now because he's learning what really matters." Julian held her tighter, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling in her voice. No one had ever seen him so clearly, had ever loved the person he was becoming rather than the image he projected. "Move in with me," Julian said suddenly. "I have this huge penthouse that's never felt like home and I want to share it with you." "Julian, we've only been together for a few weeks." "I know it's fast," Julian interrupted. "But Elise, I've spent 42 years living a half-life, and I don't want to waste another day. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want to build a real life with you." Elise looked into his eyes and saw not the powerful CEO who was used to getting what he wanted, but a man who had found love for the first time and was afraid of losing it. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll move in with you." Julian's face lit up with pure joy. "Really?" "Really," Elise confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "But I have one condition." "Anything," Julian said immediately. "I want to bring my mother to dinner next week. If we're going to do this, if we're going to build a life together, I need her to know you properly." "I would love to meet your mother," Julian said, meaning it completely. "I want to know everyone who's important to you." That evening, Julian took Elise shopping for furniture for the penthouse. He wanted her to feel completely at home, wanted every corner of his space to reflect their shared life. "This is too much," Elise said as Julian purchased yet another item she had admired. "Nothing is too much for you," Julian replied, taking her hand. Elise, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me use it to make you happy. At the jewelry counter, Julian stopped suddenly. Wait here, he said, leaving Elise by the furniture displays. He returned 10 minutes later with a small velvet box. This isn't an engagement ring, he said quickly, seeing Elise's shocked expression. It's a promise ring. A promise that everything I have, everything I am, is yours. Inside the box was a beautiful sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant but not ostentatious, perfect for Elise's taste. Julian, I can't accept something this expensive. You can and you will, Julian said firmly but gently. Because it's not about the expense. It's about the promise. Will you wear it? Elise nodded, tears streaming down her face as Julian slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Julian replied. More than I ever thought possible. As they left the store, Julian's phone rang. It was Rebecca, his assistant, with another urgent matter that would have consumed his attention just weeks ago. But looking at Elise, radiant with happiness and wearing his ring, Julian made a choice that would have been unthinkable in his old life. Rebecca, whatever it is, it can wait until tomorrow, he said. I'm exactly where I need to be. That night, as Elise fell asleep in his arms in the penthouse that finally felt like home, Julian lay awake marveling at how completely his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had been a lonely, driven man slowly killing himself with stress and ambition. Now he was a man in love, with purpose beyond profit and joy beyond success. He thought about the note Elise had given him, still kept in his wallet like a talisman. She had saved his life in more ways than she would ever know. Tomorrow he would start planning the perfect way to ask her to spend forever with him. 2 months into their relationship, Julian had never been happier. Living with Elise had transformed his sterile penthouse into a warm, welcoming home filled with laughter, cooking smells, and the kind of comfortable intimacy he had never experienced. Every morning they had breakfast together before heading to the community center, which was now just weeks away from its grand opening. The job training coordinator starts on Monday, Elise said, reviewing her notes over coffee. And we have 15 people already signed up for the first computer literacy class. Julian loved watching her in work mode, passionate, organized, completely in her element. What about the childcare program? 3 qualified staff members, and we already have a waiting list of parents who need the service, Elise replied with satisfaction. Julian, this is really going to make a difference in people's lives. You're going to make a difference, Julian corrected gently. This whole thing is your vision, your heart. Elise reached across the table to squeeze his hand. Our vision. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Julian's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Dinner tonight still on? Can't wait to meet the woman who has my son smiling again. Mom's excited about tonight, Julian said, showing Elise the message. I'm nervous, Elise admitted. What if she doesn't like me? Impossible, Julian said firmly. She's going to love you because I love you, and because you've made me happier than she's ever seen me. That afternoon, Julian surprised Elise with another gift, a small jewelry box containing diamond earrings that perfectly complemented her promise ring. Julian, you have to stop buying me things, Elise protested, even as she admired the earrings' elegant design. I'll never stop, Julian said, fastening them in her ears. Do you know what it does to me, seeing you happy? Seeing you smile? I want to spend the rest of my life finding new ways to put that look on your face. The look you put on my face has nothing to do with jewelry and everything to do with how you love me, Elise said, standing on her toes to kiss him. But thank you. They're beautiful. Dinner with Julian's mother went better than either of them had expected. Maria Cross was a warm, intelligent woman who had raised Julian alone after his father's death when Julian was 12. She immediately took to Elise, particularly when she learned about the community center. Julian told me you saved his life, Maria said during dessert. But I think you did more than that. You saved his soul. Elise blushed at the compliment. He's been incredibly generous to me and my community. I'm the lucky one. You're both lucky, Maria said wisely. Julian, your father would be so proud of the man you've become. Not because of your business success, but because you found someone who brings out your best self. After dinner, as they walked Maria to her car, she pulled Julian aside. Don't let this one get away, she whispered. She's the real deal. I have no intention of letting her go anywhere, Julian whispered back. In fact, I have some plans in that department. Good, Maria smiled. She's already like a daughter to me. The next week, Julian arranged for Elise's mother, Carmen Martinez, to join them for dinner. Carmen had been hesitant about meeting the wealthy man who was dating her daughter, worried about his intentions and the dramatic changes in Elise's life. But Julian won her over immediately by arriving with flowers and speaking to her in the Spanish he had been secretly learning with a tutor. "Es un placer conocerla, Señora Martinez," Julian said, his pronunciation careful but sincere. Carmen's face lit up with surprise and delight. "You've been learning Spanish? I wanted to be able to speak with you in your language," Julian said, switching back to English. "Elise talks about you so much and I wanted you to feel comfortable with me." Over dinner, Julian learned about Carmen's struggles as a single mother after her husband's death, working multiple cleaning jobs to keep Elise in school and pay for her college education. "She always put others first," Carmen said, her eyes proud as she looked at her daughter. "Even as a little girl, she would give away her toys to children who had less." "She still does that," Julian said, reaching for Elise's hand. "She gave me the greatest gift possible just by caring about a stranger." When Carmen mentioned struggling with her medical bills and medication costs, Julian made a mental note. The next day he arranged for the best specialists in the city to take over her care, with all expenses covered by his personal account. "Julian, this is too much," Elise protested when she learned about the medical arrangements. "Your mother raised the woman I love," Julian said simply. "Taking care of her is my privilege, not my burden." That evening as they lay in bed, Elise traced patterns on Julian's chest with her finger. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "This is all so perfect, so beautiful. You're so generous, so loving. Sometimes I worry I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." Julian turned to face her, his expression serious. "Elise, look at me. This is real. My love for you is real. The life we're building together is real. I'm not going anywhere. Promise?" "I promise," Julian said, sealing the words with a kiss that conveyed all the love and certainty in his heart. The community center's grand opening was scheduled for the following month, and Julian had been planning a surprise to commemorate the occasion. He had commissioned a bronze plaque for the building's entrance, but what Elise didn't know was that he had also commissioned something else, a custom engagement ring designed to incorporate elements meaningful to their love story. The ring featured a central diamond surrounded by smaller stones arranged to look like a heart, with tiny engravings inside the band, the date she had given him, the note that saved his life, and the words, "You gave me everything," in Spanish, "me dis to do." Julian kept the ring hidden in his office safe, waiting for the perfect moment. He wanted the proposal to be as meaningful as their love story, something that honored not just their future together but the miraculous way they had found each other. As he watched Elise sleep peacefully beside him, Julian reflected on how completely his priorities had changed. 6 months ago, his biggest concerns had been stock prices and quarterly earnings. Now, his greatest joy was simply being the man who got to love Elise Martinez, the woman who had seen him when he couldn't see himself and had loved him before he deserved it. Tomorrow he would call the jeweler to confirm the ring was ready. The grand opening of the community center was just 3 weeks away, and Julian planned to mark the occasion by asking Elise to be his wife in front of all the people whose lives she was about to transform. The morning of Julian's planned proposal, he woke up with nervous energy that surprised him. He had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but asking the woman he loved to marry him had his hands shaking as he reached for his coffee. "You're quiet this morning," Elise observed as she got ready for work. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," Julian said, forcing his voice to sound normal. "Just thinking about the community center opening tomorrow." Elise beamed with excitement. "I still can't believe it's really happening. In 24 hours, we'll be officially open and serving the community." Julian smiled, knowing that in 24 hours, they would hopefully be engaged as well. The ring was safely hidden in his office, and he had arranged for both their mothers to be at the opening ceremony, along with local officials and media coverage. He wanted their engagement to be a celebration shared with everyone who mattered to them. That afternoon, Carmen Martinez called Elise with concerning news. She had been feeling dizzy and short of breath, symptoms that sent both Elise and Julian into immediate worry mode. "I'm taking her to the emergency room," Elise said, grabbing her purse. "Julian, I'm so sorry, I know you had meetings this afternoon." "The meetings can wait," Julian said immediately. "I'm coming with you." At the hospital, they learned that Carmen's blood pressure medication needed adjusting and that she was showing early signs of heart problems that required immediate attention. "We need to keep her overnight for observation," Dr. Williams explained. "The good news is we caught this early. With the right treatment, she should be fine." While Elise stayed with her mother, Julian stepped outside to make a phone call. Within an hour, he had arranged for the city's top cardiologist to consult on Carmen's case and had a private room prepared for her with round-the-clock nursing care. "Julian, you don't need to do all this," Carmen said weakly when she learned about the arrangements. "Señora Martinez, you are going to be my mother-in-law," Julian said, taking her hand gently. "Taking care of you is not a favor, it's my responsibility and my honor." Carmen's eyes widened at his words. "Mother-in-law?" Julian realized what he had said and felt his face flush. I was hoping to ask you both something tomorrow night." Despite her illness, Carmen smiled knowingly. "You want to marry my daughter." "More than I've ever wanted anything in my life," Julian said honestly. "But first I need your blessing. I need to know that you trust me to love her and take care of her the way she deserves." Carmen studied Julian's face, seeing the genuine love and devotion there. "You saved my daughter's career, her dreams, her future. But more importantly, you made her happy. She lights up when she talks about you." "She saved me first," Julian said quietly. "In every way a person can be saved." "Then you have my blessing," Carmen said, squeezing his hand. "But Julian, I need to ask you something." "Anything. Promise me that no matter how much money you have, no matter how successful you become, you'll never forget that my daughter's heart is the most valuable thing you'll ever possess." "I promise," Julian said solemnly. "Her happiness is more important to me than my own life." Carmen nodded, satisfied. "Then welcome to the family, Mijo." That evening, while Elise slept in the chair beside her mother's hospital bed, Julian stepped outside to call his own mother. "How is she?" Maria asked immediately. "She's going to be fine," Julian assured her. "The doctors have everything under control. But Mom, I told her about my plans for tomorrow night. And? She gave us her blessing," Julian said, his voice filled with emotion. "She called me Mijo." Maria's voice was warm with affection. "That woman raised an extraordinary daughter, Julian. You're getting more than a wife, you're getting a family that knows how to love." "I know," Julian said. "I just hope I'm worthy of it." "You are," Maria said firmly. "The man you've become since meeting Elise, that's the man your father and I always hoped you would be." The next morning brought better news. Carmen's condition had stabilized, and while she would need ongoing treatment, she was strong enough to attend the community center opening that evening. "Are you sure you feel well enough?" Elise asked her mother, who was insisting on being discharged. "Mija, I have been waiting my whole life to see you this happy and successful. I wouldn't miss this for anything," Carmen said, her color already much improved. Julian had arranged for a wheelchair and private transportation for Carmen, along with a comfortable viewing area where she could rest during the ceremony. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Carmen pulled Julian aside. "You're going to ask her tonight, aren't you?" she said quietly. "How did you know?" Carmen smiled. "Because you look the same way my Roberto looked the day he was going to propose to me, excited and terrified and so full of love you can barely contain it." "Any advice?" Julian asked. "Just speak from your heart," Carmen said. "Tell her what she means to you. The rest will take care of itself." That afternoon, as Julian made final preparations for the evening, he found himself thinking about how much his life had changed since that morning when Elise had handed him a note that saved his life. He had gained not just a love but a family, a purpose, and an understanding of what truly mattered. Tonight, in front of everyone who had supported their love story, he would ask Elise Martinez to be his wife. And tomorrow, God willing, he would wake up as the luckiest man alive, engaged to the woman who had given him everything by simply caring enough to speak up when it mattered most. The ring was in his pocket, the speech was memorized, and both their mothers would be watching with joy. Julian had never been more ready for anything in his life. The grand opening of the Martinez Community Center exceeded everyone's expectations. Local officials, media representatives, and dozens of community members filled the bright, welcoming space that had been transformed from an empty building into a hub of hope and opportunity. Julian stood at the back of the main room, watching Elise address the crowd with confidence and passion. She wore a beautiful blue dress he had bought for her, paired with the sapphire promise ring that caught the light as she gestured. She looked radiant, successful, and completely in her element. 6 months ago, this was just a dream, Elise was saying to the gathered audience. A hope that maybe, somehow, we could create a place where people in our community could access the resources they need to build better lives. Today, that dream is reality. Julian's heart swelled with pride as applause filled the room. Carmen Martinez, seated comfortably in the front row with Maria crossed beside her, was wiping tears of joy from her eyes. None of this would have been possible without the generosity and vision of Julian Cross, Elise continued, her eyes finding his across the room. He didn't just provide funding, he provided partnership, friendship, and unwavering belief in this community's potential. More applause, but Julian barely heard it. All his attention was focused on Elise, on the woman who had changed everything by caring about a stranger's life. After the formal presentations, as community members toured the various program areas and enjoyed refreshments, Julian found his moment. The ring box felt heavy in his pocket as he approached the small stage where Elise was talking with a reporter. "Excuse me," Julian said politely to the reporter. "Could I borrow Ms. Martinez for just a moment?" The reporter nodded and stepped away, probably assuming Julian wanted to discuss some business matter. But as Julian took Elise's hand and led her to the center of the room, conversations began to quiet around them. "Julian, what are you doing?" Elise asked, confused but smiling. "Something I should have done weeks ago," Julian replied, his voice carrying clearly in the now silent room. He turned to address the gathered crowd, his usual business confidence replaced by the vulnerable honesty of a man deeply in love. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to share something with you," Julian began. 7 months ago I was dying. Not just physically, though that was true too, but emotionally and spiritually. I had built a successful business, accumulated more wealth than I could spend in several lifetimes, but I was empty inside. I was working myself to death, literally, and I didn't even care. Julian paused, looking directly at Elise, who was beginning to realize what was happening. Then one morning, a woman I had never spoken to, a woman who had every reason to mind her own business, risked her job to save my life. She saw symptoms of stroke that everyone else missed, and she had the courage to speak up. Murmurs of surprise and interest rippled through the crowd. "But Elise didn't just save my life that day," Julian continued, his voice growing stronger with emotion. "She gave it meaning. She showed me what it looks like to care about other people, to use whatever gifts you have to make the world better. She taught me that success isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you give." Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring box, dropping to one knee as gasps echoed through the room. Elise's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Elise Martinez," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are the most extraordinary person I have ever known. You are compassionate, brave, selfless, and beautiful inside and out. You saw me when I couldn't even see myself, and you loved me before I deserved it." He opened the ring box, revealing the custom engagement ring that sparkled under the community center's bright lights. "I want to spend the rest of my life earning the gift of your love. I want to be the man who gets to support your dreams, celebrate your victories, and love you through whatever comes. Will you marry me?" The room was completely silent except for the sound of happy tears from multiple sources. Elise looked down at Julian, this powerful man humbling himself before her and an entire community, declaring his love with complete vulnerability. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes. Of course yes." The room erupted in applause and cheers as Julian slipped the ring onto Elise's finger and swept her into his arms for a kiss that conveyed years of love in a single moment. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too," she replied, laughing through her tears. Carmen Martinez was openly crying with joy, while Maria Cross beamed with maternal pride. Community members who had benefited from the center's programs before it even officially opened were cheering for the couple whose love story had made their dreams possible. As the celebration continued around them, Julian and Elise found a quiet corner to admire her new ring and process what had just happened. "The inscription inside," Julian said, "do you see it?" Elise tilted the ring to catch the light, reading the tiny engraving, "Me dis to do February 15th. You gave me everything," she translated, her voice filled with wonder. "The date you went to the hospital. The day my real life began," Julian confirmed. "Elise, I meant every word I said up there. You didn't just save my life, you gave me a reason to live it. You gave me reasons to dream bigger than I ever thought possible," Elise replied, admiring the ring that fit perfectly on her finger. "Look at this place, Julian. Look at what we built together." "This is just the beginning," Julian promised. "Whatever dreams you have next, whatever you want to accomplish, I want to be right there beside you making it happen." As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Julian, Elise, and their mothers sat together in Elise's new office, surrounded by flowers and congratulations cards from the evening's celebration. "You know what this means?" Carmen said with a sly smile. "We need to start planning a wedding." "The biggest, most beautiful wedding this city has ever seen," Maria agreed. "Nothing is too good for our children." Julian and Elise exchanged amused glances, both thinking the same thing, that the wedding, however elaborate, would pale in comparison to the love story that had brought them to this moment. "Actually," Elise said, surprising everyone. I want something different. I want a wedding that reflects who we really are, not just a big expensive party. What do you have in mind? Julian asked, curious. I want to get married right here, Elise said, gesturing to the community center around them. In the place where our love created something beautiful for other people. I want our wedding to be a celebration not just of us, but of community, family, and the kind of love that makes the world better. Julian felt his heart swell with even more love for this incredible woman. That sounds perfect, he said. Absolutely perfect. As they made plans late into the night, Julian reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A simple note, born of compassion and courage, had transformed two lives and created something beautiful that would serve their community for generations to come. Tomorrow they would wake up as an engaged couple, ready to plan their future together. But tonight, they were simply two people who had found in each other everything they never knew they were looking for. 3 months later, Julian and Elise's relationship had deepened into the kind of partnership that both of them had only dreamed was possible. Their engagement had been covered by local media as a modern fairy tale, the billionaire CEO and the community advocate whose love story had created tangible change in their city. The Martinez Community Center was thriving beyond their wildest expectations. The job training program had already helped 37 people find employment, the health screening clinic had identified serious conditions in dozens of community members who couldn't otherwise afford medical care, and the childcare program had a 6-month waiting list. We need to consider expanding, Elise said one morning over breakfast, reviewing program statistics on her laptop. Maybe opening a second location on the east side. Julian smiled, watching her work. Even engaged to one of the wealthiest men in the city, Elise remained focused on serving others. Whatever you think is best. You know I'll support anything you want to do. Their wedding planning had been a joy rather than a stress, mainly because Elise's vision of celebrating in the community center had simplified many decisions. Instead of an elaborate venue, they would transform the center's main room into a beautiful ceremony space. Instead of expensive catering, local restaurants that had benefited from the center's programs were donating food for the reception. Mom called last night, Elise said, closing her laptop. She wants to make sure you're okay with her making my wedding dress. Your mother is making your dress? Julian asked, surprised. She's an incredibly talented seamstress, Elise explained. She made all my clothes growing up and she's been dreaming of making my wedding dress since I was little. It means everything to her. Julian felt touched by the gesture. I think that's beautiful. I love that your dress will be made with that kind of love. What about you? Have you thought about your vows? Julian had been thinking about his vows constantly, trying to find words adequate to express what Elise meant to him. How do you capture the experience of being saved, transformed, and given purpose by one person's love? I have some ideas, he said. But I want them to be perfect. That afternoon, Julian had a meeting that he had been both anticipating and dreading. His lawyer, Paul Henderson, had prepared the prenuptial agreement that Julian's financial advisors had insisted was necessary. It's fairly standard, Paul explained, sliding the document across his desk. It protects your assets acquired before the marriage, ensures the business interests remain secure, and provides generous provisions for Elise in the unlikely event of divorce. Julian stared at the papers, feeling a knot form in his stomach. The document was thorough, legally sound, and completely contrary to everything he felt about his relationship with Elise. What if I don't want a prenup? Julian asked suddenly. Paul looked shocked. Julian, you're worth over $3 billion. A prenuptial agreement isn't optional, it's essential. But what does it say about my faith in this marriage? What does it say about my trust in Elise? It says you're being smart, Paul replied firmly. Look, I'm sure she's wonderful, but people change. Circumstances change. This protects both of you. That evening, Julian brought the prenuptial agreement home, his stomach churning with anxiety. He found Elise in their home office, working on grant applications for the community center's expansion. How was your meeting with Paul? She asked, looking up with a smile. Complicated, Julian admitted, sitting down across from her. Elise, there's something we need to discuss. He placed the prenup on the desk between them. Elise glanced at it, immediately understanding what it was. Your lawyers want me to sign this, she said, her voice neutral. They say it's standard that anyone in my financial position needs this kind of protection, Julian explained, hating every word. Elise picked up the document and flipped through it, her expression unreadable. Julian watched her face, trying to gauge her reaction. It's very generous, she said finally. More than generous, actually. Elise, I want you to know I don't want this thing. I don't want any legal document that starts from the assumption that our marriage might fail. But your advisors think it's necessary? They think I'm crazy for even hesitating, Julian admitted. Elise was quiet for a long moment, studying the papers. Then she did something that Julian never expected. She laughed. What's funny? He asked, confused. Julian, do you remember what I said the first night you took me to dinner? When you offered to fund the community center. You said it was too much. And what did you say? Julian thought back. I said nothing was too much for you. That's right, Elise said, standing up and walking around the desk to sit on his lap. You've been saying that for months now. Every gift, every gesture, every way you show your love, you always say nothing is too much for me. Because it's true. Then this shouldn't be too much either, Elise said, picking up the prenup and tearing it cleanly in half. Your complete trust. Your absolute faith in us. Your willingness to risk everything on our love. Julian stared at her in amazement. Elise, you can't just tear up a prenup. What if someday? Someday what? She interrupted gently. Someday I decide I want half your money more than I want your love? Someday I forget that you saved my life just as much as I saved yours? Julian, if you can't trust me with your fortune, then you shouldn't trust me with your heart either. Julian felt tears prick his eyes. I do trust you. Completely. I just thought. You thought you should listen to lawyers instead of your heart, Elise said, kissing his forehead. I understand why. But Julian, I fell in love with you when I thought you were just an overworked executive having health problems. Your money didn't make me love you, your soul did. What am I going to tell Paul and the financial advisors? Tell them that some investments are worth any risk, Elise said with a smile. Tell them you're betting everything on love, and you've never been more confident about a decision in your life. That night, as they lay in bed, Julian held Elise closer than ever before. You continue to amaze me, he whispered into her hair. Most people would have insisted on the prenup for their own protection. Most people aren't marrying their soulmate, Elise replied sleepily. Besides, I have everything I need right here in my arms. 2 weeks before the wedding, Julian received an unexpected call that would test their love in a different way. His business partner from his early days, Robert Kane, was facing a crisis that threatened to bankrupt his company and destroy his family's financial security. I need $200 million to save the company, Robert explained during an emergency meeting. Julian, I know it's a lot to ask, but you're the only person I know who could write a check that big. What happened? Julian asked, though he suspected he already knew. Robert had always been a risk-taker, sometimes to a fault. Bad investments, market downturns, some deals that went sideways, Robert admitted. Look, I know we haven't been close in recent years, but we built our first company together. We were like brothers once. Julian thought about the early days when he and Robert had worked 18-hour days in a cramped office, living on pizza and dreams. Robert had been his closest friend before success, and different life choices had pulled them apart. Let me think about it, Julian said finally. I'll have an answer for you tomorrow. That evening, Julian explained the situation to Elise. $200 million wouldn't bankrupt him, but it was still a significant portion of his liquid assets. What does your gut tell you? Elise asked. That Robert made some terrible decisions and is hoping our old friendship will bail him out, Julian said honestly. But also that if I don't help him, his wife and kids will lose everything. And if you do help him? There's no guarantee he won't make the same mistakes again. I could be throwing $200 million into a black hole. Elise curled up next to him on the sofa. Julian, what would you have done before we met? Probably said no. Too risky, too emotional, not a sound business decision. And what does your heart tell you to do now? Julian was quiet for a moment, thinking about how dramatically his priorities had shifted. To help him. Not because it's good business, but because it's the right thing to do. Then that's your answer, Elise said simply. Just like that? You're not worried about what it might mean for our financial security? Elise laughed. Julian, we have more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. And more importantly, we have something money can't buy. We have love, purpose, and each other. Everything else is just numbers on a page. The next morning, Julian called Robert with his answer. I'll transfer the money this afternoon, he said. But Robert, this comes with conditions. Anything, Robert said, relief evident in his voice. You go into financial counseling. You bring in a professional money manager. And you send me quarterly reports on how the funds are being used. This isn't charity, it's an investment in your family's future, and I want to make sure it's protected. Julian, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by making better choices going forward, Julian interrupted. And by being there when other people need help the way you needed it today. After hanging up, Julian felt the same satisfaction he had experienced when opening the community center, the deep joy that comes from using resources to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. That evening, Elise surprised him with a small gift, a leather-bound journal with their initials embossed on the cover. "What's this for?" Julian asked. "I want us to keep a record of our first year of marriage," Elise explained. "All the big moments, the small joys, the challenges we faced together. Someday when we're old and gray, we can look back and remember exactly how it felt to be this happy." Julian flipped through the blank pages, imagining them filled with memories yet to be made. "I love this idea. Though I have to warn you, if I'm documenting how happy you make me, we're going to need a lot of journals." "Good thing you can afford them," Elise teased, kissing his cheek. As their wedding day approached, Julian found himself marveling at how completely his life had been transformed. A year ago, he had been a lonely workaholic, slowly killing himself with stress and ambition. Now he was days away from marrying the most extraordinary woman he had ever known, spending his wealth on projects that actually mattered, and waking up every morning excited about the life they were building together. The man who had once measured success solely in dollars and market share now understood that real wealth came from love, purpose, and the connections we make with other people. And all of it had started with a simple act of compassion from a woman who cared enough about a stranger to risk everything to save his life. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and beautiful, with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of the community center that had become the heart of their love story. Julian woke up in his penthouse for the last time as a single man, his stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. His phone was already buzzing with messages from friends, business associates, and community members sending their congratulations. But the text that meant the most came from Elise. "Today I get to marry my best friend. I love you." Julian's mother arrived early to help him get ready, bringing with her the vintage cufflinks that had belonged to his father. "Dad would have loved Elise," Julian said as Maria fastened the cufflinks to his shirt. "He would have been so proud of the man you've become," Maria replied, tears in her eyes. "Not because of your success, but because you found someone who brings out your best self." Meanwhile, across town, Elise was getting ready in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by her mother, Julian's mother, who had insisted on being part of the preparation, and several friends from the community center. Carmen had worked for months on Elise's wedding dress, a stunning creation of ivory silk and delicate lace that perfectly captured her daughter's elegant but unpretentious style. "Mija, you look like a princess," Carmen said, fastening the last button on the dress she had sewn with so much love. "I feel like one," Elise replied, admiring herself in the mirror. "Mom, thank you for making this dress. It's perfect." "Your father would have been so proud," Carmen said, her voice thick with emotion. "He always said you had the biggest heart of anyone he knew." As the afternoon approached, the community center was transformed into a wedding venue that perfectly reflected Julian and Elise's values. Instead of expensive floral arrangements, they had asked community members to bring flowers from their own gardens, creating a beautiful, organic display that represented the grassroots nature of their love story. Local musicians who had performed at community center events provided the music. The catering came from family-owned restaurants that had participated in the center's small business development program. Everything about the celebration honored the community that had embraced their love and been transformed by their partnership. Julian arrived at the center an hour before the ceremony, wanting to see the space in its wedding transformation. He was amazed by how beautiful it looked, warm, welcoming, and filled with the same love that had gone into creating the programs housed within those walls. "Nervous?" asked Paul, Julian's lawyer, who was serving as his best man at Julian's request, a gesture of forgiveness for the prenup situation that had strengthened their friendship. "Not nervous," Julian replied, adjusting his tie. "Excited, grateful, ready to start the rest of my life." The guests began arriving, a mix of business leaders, community members, family friends, and the staff from the community center who had become like family to both Julian and Elise. What struck everyone was how naturally these different worlds blended together, united by their shared affection for the couple. Robert Kane was there with his wife and children, his business stabilized thanks to Julian's loan and his newfound commitment to responsible financial management. Dr. Williams, the emergency room doctor who had treated Julian's near stroke, sat next to Carmen Martinez, deep in conversation about community health initiatives. As the ceremony time approached, Julian took his place at the front of the room, looking out at the faces of people who had supported their love story. The musicians began the processional music, and Julian's heart started racing with anticipation. Maria Cross walked down the aisle first, radiant with joy for her son. Then came Carmen Martinez, beautiful in a dress that Elise had insisted Julian buy for her face glowing with pride for her daughter. Finally, the music changed and Elise appeared at the back of the room. Julian's breath caught in his throat. She was absolutely stunning, but more than her beauty, it was the joy on her face that made his heart soar. She walked down the aisle unescorted, her choice, she had said, because she was choosing Julian freely and needed no one to give her away. When she reached him, Julian took her hands, marveling at how perfectly they fit in his. "You look incredible," he whispered. "So do you," she whispered back, her eyes sparkling with happiness. The officiant, a minister from the local church who had become a friend through their community work, began the ceremony with words that honored both their love story and their commitment to service. "We are gathered here today not just to witness the marriage of Julian and Elise, but to celebrate a love story that has transformed not just two lives, but an entire community," he said. "Their love has created hope where there was despair, opportunity where there was limitation, and proof that when we care for one another, miracles happen." When it came time for vows, Julian went first, his voice strong and clear as he spoke from his heart. "Elise, a year ago I was dying not just physically but spiritually and emotionally. I had built a successful business but had lost my soul in the process. Then one morning, a woman I had never spoken to cared enough about a stranger to risk her job and her reputation to save my life." Julian paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But you didn't just save my life that day, my love. You gave it meaning. You showed me what real success looks like, not in profit margins or market share, but in how many lives you touch, how much love you give, how much hope you create." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the original note Elise had given him almost a year ago. "I've carried this note with me every day since you gave it to me," Julian continued. "It reminds me that love isn't just a feeling, it's action. It's caring enough to speak up when it matters. It's risking yourself for someone else's well-being. It's choosing to see the best in people even when they can't see it in themselves." Julian's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Elise Martinez, you are the most extraordinary person I have ever known. You are compassionate without being naive, strong without being hard, successful without being selfish. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me." He took her hands more firmly in his. "I promise to love you not just with my heart, but with my actions. I promise to support your dreams as enthusiastically as you've supported mine. I promise to use whatever gifts I've been given to make your world more beautiful, just as you've made mine. I promise to never take for granted the miracle of your love, and to spend every day of our marriage grateful that you chose to save not just my life, but my soul." There wasn't a dry eye in the room as Julian finished his vows. Elise was openly crying, overwhelmed by the depth of love in his words. When it was her turn, Elise's voice was soft but clear, carrying easily through the silent room. "Julian, when I wrote you that note almost a year ago, I was just trying to prevent another family from losing someone they loved the way we lost my father. I never imagined that trying to save your life would end up saving mine." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You have given me things I never dreamed were possible, not just material things, though your generosity has transformed my life, but something much more precious. You've given me the chance to make my biggest dreams come true. You've shown me what it feels like to be loved not just for who I am, but for who I want to become." Elise's voice grew stronger as she continued. "But most importantly, you've shown me what real partnership looks like. You don't just say you support my work, you roll up your sleeves and help make it happen. You don't just claim to love me, you prove it every single day with your actions, your priorities, your choices." She looked around the room at the community center that had become the symbol of their love. "This place exists because you saw my dream and made it your mission. These programs serve families because you understand that my happiness is tied to my purpose. This community is stronger because you've learned that true success means lifting others up." Elise turned back to Julian, her eyes shining with love. "I promise to continue growing into the woman you see when you look at me. I promise to support your dreams as completely as you've supported mine. I promise to never let you forget that your value isn't measured in dollars but in the love you give and the lives you touch. I promise to spend our marriage showing you every day that you are worthy of being saved, worthy of being loved, worthy of all the happiness we're going to create together." She smiled through her tears. "Julian Cross, you saved my life by letting me save yours. You gave me purpose by making my purpose yours. You are my best friend, my greatest love, and my perfect partner. I can't wait to spend forever showing you just how extraordinary you are." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Julian and Elise kissed with the passion of two people who had found in each other everything they never knew they were looking for. The room erupted in applause and cheers from community members, business leaders, family, and friends who had all been touched by their love story. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Julian caught sight of the bronze plaque by the entrance. Martinez Community Center, founded in love, built in hope, sustained by community. Below it, in smaller text, dedicated to Roberto Martinez and all those who teach us that caring for strangers makes us family. The reception was everything they had hoped for: warm, joyful, and focused on celebration rather than extravagance. Local musicians played while guests enjoyed food prepared by community restaurants. Children from the center's programs ran around the edges of the dance floor while their parents celebrated the couple who had made their children's futures brighter. During his wedding speech, Julian stood with his arm around his new wife, looking out at the faces of everyone who had supported their journey. A year ago, if someone had told me I would be standing here, married to the most incredible woman in the world in a community center we built together, I would have thought they were crazy, Julian began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. But that's the thing about love: it doesn't ask your permission to change your life. It just shows up one day, usually in the most unexpected way, and everything you thought you knew about yourself suddenly becomes irrelevant. Julian looked down at Elise, who was beaming up at him. My wife and I love being able to say that didn't just save my life when she warned me about stroke symptoms. She taught me how to live it. She showed me that success isn't about what you accumulate but about what you give. She proved that the most valuable investment you can make is in other people's dreams. He gestured around the room at the community center filled with wedding guests. This place exists because Elise had a vision and I had the resources to make it happen. But it thrives because all of you, this community, understood that when we take care of each other, we all become stronger. Julian's voice grew more emotional as he continued. Elise, my love, you have given me everything: purpose, joy, a family, and a reason to be grateful every single day that I'm alive. You've shown me what it means to love someone so completely that their happiness becomes more important than your own success. He raised his glass. To my wife, Elise Cross, the woman who saved my life and then taught me how to live it. To this community that has embraced our love story and made it part of your own. And to the power of caring about each other, because that's where all the best stories begin. The toast was followed by dancing that went well into the evening. Julian and Elise moved through their reception like people who couldn't quite believe their good fortune, stopping to talk with guests, accepting congratulations, and marveling at how perfectly their different worlds had come together. Late in the evening, as the last guests were leaving, Julian and Elise found themselves alone in the community center that had become the symbol of their love. The decorations were still up, the flowers still fresh, the lingering warmth of celebration still filling the air. Mrs. Cross, Julian said, pulling Elise into his arms for another dance to music that was now playing only in their hearts. I like the sound of that, Elise replied, swaying with him in the quiet room. Any regrets about not having a traditional fancy wedding? Julian asked. Are you kidding? Elise laughed, looking around at the space where they had exchanged vows. We got married in the place that represents everything we believe in, surrounded by people who genuinely love us, celebrating not just our love but the community we've built together. This was perfect. As they danced slowly in the center of the room where Elise had first envisioned health screenings and job training classes, Julian reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A simple note, written by a compassionate woman who cared about a stranger's well-being, had created a love story that had transformed not just two lives but an entire community. Ready to go home, husband? Elise asked, using his new title with obvious joy. With you? I'm ready for anything, Julian replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. As they left the community center together, hand in hand, Julian knew that this was just the beginning of their story. Tomorrow they would wake up as husband and wife, ready to face whatever challenges and joys marriage would bring. They would continue growing their community programs, supporting each other's dreams, and proving every day that love in action can change the world. The reserved lady who had noticed symptoms everyone else ignored had indeed saved the billionaire CEO's life. But in doing so, she had saved her own as well, and together they had created something beautiful that would serve their community for generations to come. Their love story had started with a simple act of caring, and it would continue with a lifetime of caring for each other and the world around them. And that, Julian thought as he helped his wife into the car that would take them home to begin their married life, was the most perfect ending he could have imagined. Dear readers, thank you for following Julian and Elise's incredible journey from strangers to soulmates. Their story reminds us that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create the most profound changes in our lives. Questions for you to ponder. Have you ever noticed something about a stranger that others missed? Did you have the courage to speak up like Elise did? What would you do if someone showed you the kind of selfless care that Elise showed Julian? Do you believe that true love can really transform someone as completely as it transformed Julian? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and reflections make this community even more beautiful.